Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. Couple additional steps there to get in. All right, are we ready? Work sessions are an opportunity for board members to discuss issues informally with staff and invited guests. The board encourages members of the public to attend work sessions, listen to the discussion, but there's generally no opportunity for public comment. Members of the public wishing to address the board are welcome to do so during the board's regularly scheduled meetings held twice monthly. And we'll go ahead and start with the county manager update and County Manager Don Boone.
Thank you, Chair Cuerlo, members of the board. Great to see everybody again. I know it was only 2 weeks, but 2 weeks seems like a long time, especially when you come back to a lot of pent-up issues. So I don't really have anything. I did want to mention to the board that I sent out a list, and it's really part of the conversation that'll be happening a little bit later in the agenda about the strategic plan. But I did send out a project list that just summarized a lot of the major or significant initiatives that we've been working on over the last couple of years. I think it's just important to always, kind of chronicle all the things that are happening. And that list certainly is not inclusive of all the activities of the county, and I will say that, but I think it does make me pause and want to just thank your board and staff for all the amazing work we've been doing together over the last several years. So kudos to everybody. What I always talk about is, counties do two things. We interpret public interest, and then we maintain public trust by providing efficient and effective and relevant services. And I think we all have a lot to be proud of as we think about the work we've done. So that's all I have, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, County Manager. And I do appreciate you setting out those lists of priorities and projects, because it is easy to forget how much has been done and accomplished over the last year. So as we go into this update of the strategic plan, it's always good to keep in mind that we've made significant progress on a lot of these issues. And we've done so in light of, having funding issues with homelessness and HCPs and FEMA buy-ups and other things lingering over us that occupy a lot of bandwidth for our county manager and staff. But again, we do appreciate all that's been done, and thanks for the update. We'll move on to the next item. Extension Advisory Council review of applicant on page 3. And it looks like we're joined by Tammy Olds, who's OSU Clatsop County Office Manager. So Tammy, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thanks. Good morning. I'm Tammy at the Extension Office, and we had a request to review and approve an applicant to our Clatsop County Extension Advisory Council. We currently have 7 members on the council, all whose terms began in March of 2022. Additional committee members were recruited to stagger terms. Article 3, Section 3 of the current bylaws state the advisory council shall consist of no fewer than 5 nor more than 15 members. We attach a bylaws as Exhibit A. A call for applicants was placed under the committee vacancies on the Clatsop County website and was shared with our contacts in September of 2023, as noted in Exhibit B. Our Extension Advisory Council applicant's name is Jenny Poole Radway, and she represents Consejo Hispano as the Executive Director. And her complete application is submitted as Exhibit C. Our current Extension Advisory Council members, all whose terms expire in March 30, 2025, are Patrick Corcoran, retired Sea Grant, Ed Johnson, representing Ag and Livestock Small Farms, Kevin Leahy from the Clatsop Economic Development Resources and Small Business Development Centers, John Nygaard, Forestry and Wood Products Industry and Attorney, Melissa Paget, representing our 4-H Association and the Tongue Point Job Corps, Chad Washington from the forestry industry and now works at Greenwood Resources, and Angie and she represents farmers markets in the Sunset Empire Parks and Rec and is a business owner.
Great. Well, thank you, Tammy. Appreciate the summary and presentation. Do we have any questions? I think many of us are familiar with Jenny Poole Radway from her work with Consejo España. So fantastic to see that we have her application. Okay. I don't see any comments or questions, so we'll go ahead and move on to the next item. Thank you, Tammy. Appreciate it. Thanks for being here.
Thanks.
Next item is the Clatsop Behavioral Healthcare semi-annual update. And I see that Amy Baker, Executive Director of Clatsop Behavioral Healthcare, is joining us as a presenter. I'll go ahead and turn it over to Amy. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you. I'm wondering, Teresa, if you could also have Shira Marilla join as a panelist.
Sure, just one moment.
There we go. See Shira. Welcome, Shira.
So we have presented us a PowerPoint for you today that I'm hoping that we can share. And for the record, my name is Amy Baker, and I'm the Executive Director of Clatsop Behavioral Healthcare. And Shira, do you want to introduce yourself?
I am Shira Marilla. I'm the Deputy Director for Clatsop Behavioral Healthcare.
Great. So today we wanted to present some information on trends that we've been seeing since the last time we were here. Want to talk a little bit about our funding streams and child and family services, as well as substance use services, and then also some project updates. So this information has been requested of me in the past, and this basically shows the different revenue streams that go into CBH's portfolio. And it starts with State General Fund, which is around 13%, and the categories go around clockwise around the pie chart. So CPCCO makes up about 43% of our funding. Developmental disabilities is about 9%. NCCRC which is our residential facility, is 12%. Contracts or myriad of contracts are about 15%, and the 8% is other. And that's like mostly insurance, commercial, Medicaid, open card, and Medicare. So I'm going to ask Shira to talk a little bit about like what we're seeing with the child and family team, because I think it's like pretty relevant in as we continue to move through the pandemic. We're really seeing the effect of isolation on kids and families. And I am going to put this slide in, and Shira, if you want to go ahead and talk about what it is that we're seeing.
Yeah, so as Amy said, we've seen a pretty significant increase in service utilization for child and family services. Kids are just really struggling. I think, like she said, the isolation from the pandemic, we are seeing an increase in the number of kids that we're serving, and we're also seeing an increase in the services that each child is receiving. And so the acuity that kids are experiencing and families are experiencing is much more significant. We're seeing a lot of like co-occurring. So kids are coming in with both mental health challenges, whether it's depression, anxiety, suicidality, a lot of social anxiety, as well as substance use. And in Oregon, we don't have a lot of residential, actually, we don't have any residential service providers that treat kids with co-occurring. So both mental health and substances. And we're experiencing a lot of provider burnout. Like our team's pretty stable, I would say, but they're tired. And we have some openings on our child and family team. which is making it just challenging to meet the needs in the community right now. The providers are definitely extremely fatigued. Did you want to add anything, Amy?
No, I think that's a pretty good synopsis. And this basically shows there's been an uptick in kids and families that we're serving in Clatsop County. Another serious trend, which I'm sure we're all aware of, is, and we wanted to talk about this a little bit today, that we wanted to show some trends that we're seeing with substance use disorder services. And I think this data point will kind of help illustrate some of the key things that have happened over the last, like we started in 2019 and looked through 2023. And what we see, this is for all of, we have 3 different substance use disorder treatment programs. And one of them is our medication assisted treatment program. So that's where we work with folks intensively, and our medical practitioners prescribe Suboxone. And the numbers on everything dropped in 2020, which is when the pandemic happened. And we think some of that is because people were going out less, but we also think some of that is because the jail policy around COVID and not keeping folks in treatment. And you can kind of see the combination of both the jail and then Measure 110 really had an effect on our mandated population. So folks who are mandated into treatment by the justice system, that is this line right here going down. If you can see it, it's the second one up from the bottom. And in 22, it bounced up a little bit, but not much. What we've seen on the very bottom line is that is our voluntary adult outpatient services. And as we hired more staff because of the funding from Measure 110, we started engaging more folks in treatment. What I will say, and I don't have good enough data on this to say with any kind of definitivity, but it does look like our average number of sessions per episode has gone down since 2019. But it's really hard to say how much of that has to do with like having fewer people who are mandated into care versus the potency of fentanyl and how much harder it is to treat folks given that potency. This shows an overall unique outpatient client served over the last 5 years. The 2023 is obviously not complete, so I annualized that number so it would be more of a, you get a better comparison between 2022 and 2023. And basically, these are clients served. This number is going up in a lot due to our recovery allies. So there are folks who have substance use disorder histories, and we have a team of 6 now, and they are everywhere in the community. They're in the jail, they're in the homeless camps, they're in the ED, they're everywhere where we get called as a means to try to engage folks into care. And then this is just all of our outpatient programs. This is mental health and substance use disorder, child and family. And you can see this, and this drop in 2020 due to the pandemic, and then you also see it like, and this is service units. This is not clients. You see the numbers starting to rebound for all services. Did you want to add anything about before I go to this part, Shira, about, oh yeah, I wanted you to talk about fentanyl and xylazine.
Sure. So as you all know, like heroin used to be one of our biggest challenges as an SUD provider. One of the things that changed pretty significantly in our community, I'd say, you know, in the last 3 years, there's a lot of things that happened right at one time. So it's really hard to kind of like suss out cause and effect for each thing. So fentanyl happened to our community, the pandemic happened, and then Measure 110 happened. And so all of those things are kind of contributing to trends that we're seeing and the things that Amy was speaking to. But as far as fentanyl goes, basically it came in and it took over. So folks that used to be addicted to heroin couldn't actually get a hold of heroin anymore. And heroin is, what is it? It's like 1/100th as addictive as fentanyl. And so folks that were addicted to heroin basically were forced to switch to fentanyl, which is much more addictive and much more dangerous. And so what we're seeing in the community is a huge significant increase in overdoses. And what used to be the case with heroin and was kind of a component of our harm reduction services was that, you know, if somebody were to overdose on like a specific, you know, like bag or batch of heroin, that other people in the community kind of knew that maybe that was something that they would avoid intentionally, right? That's kind of a part of harm reduction. Like you're not going to use that. Someone just OD'd. So that's something that we're going to stay away from. That isn't the case anymore. Overdosing has just become such a normal part of use that most of the people who are addicted to fentanyl have overdosed at least once. And so distributing Narcan is just so crucial right now. And then the other component is xylazine is new in the last like year, I'd say. When I say new, I mean to our community. It's been out in other places, especially in the metro area. But xylazine is a tranquilizer. And when it's taken with fentanyl, they talk about it like it gives fentanyl legs. And so it makes the high last much longer. That's actually something else that's different between fentanyl and heroin is that the high with fentanyl is pretty short. And so the use is much more frequent. So people that are using fentanyl have to be using pretty much all day if they want to be able to stay well and function in whatever capacity they're working to function in. Xylazine makes the high of fentanyl last much longer. The problem with xylazine is, well, several problems with it. One is that it causes open wounds on people. And it also can cause overdose in and of itself. And so folks that are using fentanyl can assume that there's typically xylazine in it at this point, but it's hard to know how much. And so you could be walking down the street and then simply just collapse if there is xylazine in the fentanyl that you've been using. Anything else, Amy?
Perfect. So I wanted to just jump to some of the things that we're working on and current challenges. Update on the Marine Drive housing. I believe I close on the property today. We were awarded funding through the Oregon Housing Community Services. We have a couple other grant applications out there, and we're going to be applying for low-income tax credit funding. But we're on our way with that project, with the goal of having 32 units of permanent supported housing built within the next 2 years. The Red Lion housing project, that is well on its way in terms of the design team, and we are hoping and expecting to place folks into housing there starting next summer. I think that will make an enormous difference, especially as the Columbia Inn shelter gets up and going, that we'll have places for people to go, which is just huge. Primary care continues to be a bit of a struggle in terms of getting folks seen. We're like exploring options to be able to provide primary care through CBH. We feel like we have the expertise really to serve folks with serious mental illness, severe addiction, and also developmental disabilities. But that one's probably several years down the road. Some of the challenges that we're experiencing, Shira is absolutely right. Workforce, it is really hard to hire master level clinicians. right now. They're highly in demand. It's not just us, it's other providers all around the state. But we've had open positions on both the adult team and the kid team for, a year and a half. So we're starting to have conversations around like, how do we meet the need and maintain the level of expertise that we need to maintain in order to address the needs of this community. Our entire organization absolutely experiences the challenge of not having substance use disorder detox and residential services. We just had an opioid summit, and that came up over and over again. As CBH, I don't really want to be the entity to provide it, mostly because I don't want to stretch ourselves so thin that we fail at everything. But I'm very interested in developing partnerships and figuring out a way that we have easier access to that, because there's nothing worse than catching somebody in that 15 minutes of readiness and then not have anything for them. That just feels really bad. So that's a challenge, and it's also an opportunity to create new partnerships and develop new resources. Your slideshow has changed because I popped this in with the co-imagine authorization. I was super grateful that the Daily Astorian covered that in their front page article, because we have been struggling with the Oregon Health Authority for the last 2 years around getting appropriate authorizations and funding. And we have, like last year in 2022, we lost around $200,000 because of the difficulty in getting the state to pay for those services. It is a legit complaint. It's absolutely something that we've experienced, as the board has had conversations about how long we could carry residential in absence of the state's willingness to put in a process of payment that actually covers the services. And I think about all the times that I've come and done presentations to you all over the years, and you always ask how you can help. And I'm going to say this is one of those ways that you can help. I think it's the co-imagine is a third-party entity that reviews all residential cases. And they do it from the perspective of wanting to save money and wanting to move clients along quickly out of residential so that it opens up space for the next person. The problem is that we don't have places for people to go. And it is 100% unethical to discharge somebody with serious mental illness to the streets. So we don't do it. We just hold on to these folks and we lose money. I do believe that once we open up the Red Lion housing project and then the Marine Drive housing project, it will make those discharges so much easier. It will open up residential as a resource, but you all know the housing situation right now. We just don't have a lot of options to discharge folks to. So, questions for us?
Well, thank you so much, Director Baker and Deputy Director Morella. The fentanyl is such an insidious entity in our community, and I know that not only your organization but law enforcement and the hospital as well. Have to struggle with this challenge now, and it's horrible. But I was curious. You said Measure 110 funding had helped with staffing. Can you quantify that? How much?
Yeah, thank you for asking. I probably whipped through that part too quick. After all these years, I still get nervous for these presentations. Yes, so we were able to hire probably an additional 4 or 5 staff. And it allowed us to start our partnership with the Clatsop County Jail. So we have somebody who's in the jail prescribing Suboxone. We have Recovery Allies who are working with the jail, and we're in the process of hiring a clinician. We're going to co-fund it between the sheriff's office and us. We're co-funding a position so that while we have folks in the jail who are a captive audience, we're going to get them into treatment quickly and hang on to them when they discharge. It's you know, we all know jail's like not the best treatment system. Like that isn't where you would send your kid to treatment if you had the choice, but it is a place that interrupts the pattern of using. And it does give us a chance to engage folks into care and try to hold on to them. So yes, the Measure 110 has been enormously helpful in terms of like our flexibility to do things that we couldn't do with just Medicaid funding.
Yeah, thank you for that additional narrative there. And I appreciated the presentation very much. I see Commissioner Webb and Commissioner Banks have questions. So Commissioner Webb.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Amy, as always. This big opioid summit that just happened, do you have any takeaways from that?
Shira, do you want to take a crack at that one?
Sure. So actually, Amy did the sort of like summarizing presentation for the opioid summit. And so I don't know how many people were there, maybe 250, 300. And it was really like a community conversation about action steps. So where do we go from here and what do we want to focus on? And Amy did a fantastic job of really engaging everyone in brainstorming ideas. And there's a lot, right? Like we have a lot on our plate and we need to figure out how to prioritize what we want to focus on first. My impression of that conversation is that we need to focus on missing pieces in our continuum of care specific to substance use, right? And so like Amy was talking about earlier, we don't have enough detox beds and we don't have enough residential beds. And so our challenge is that, you know, we might be interacting with more community members who are using, but keeping them engaged in services without the resources that they need in order to get better is really, really challenging, right? And you can only imagine like, you might get into detox. You might go through the process of having to detox, which is a very like painful process and experience. But if you get out of detox and you don't have access to a residential bed and then sober living after that, then you're detoxing probably back to the streets where you're probably just going to be using again. And so that's, I think, what I really took away from the conversation is that collectively as a region, we really need to focus on building up those resources so that we can help people from start to finish in their recovery journey.
Could I ask, is the sorry, I'm terribly distracted. I've got the trouble with being in a virtual meeting is that I have gardeners and dogs and other things, which is a good thing. But is the CCPO folks, you know, are they paying much? I see their work as primarily giving out a lot of money for, I mean, very good causes for housing. What are they doing for you all? Are they giving you money? Are they?
Yes, they are. Like CPCCOs are. I think they're a really good partner as far as CCOs go. I hear less supportive stories from some of my sister organizations around the state, but their challenge, like they've contracted with every substance use facility in the state that they can. It's just that there's not enough capacity statewide. So they're in this, like, I think they would help, like Columbia County Mental Health used to operate Pathways, which is a residential facility, and they closed during the pandemic because they couldn't hire nurses. Detox requires 24/7 nursing. Like they would provide support to get something up and going. It's just that you have to have an entity that's willing to do it. So if CBH decided, okay, like, you know, we're gonna do it, like this is something that really needs to happen, like they would help fund that. My reticence around it is that it's hard to run 24/7 programs. As I'm sure most of you know, it's not just the finding the staff to do the 24/7, but then it's all of the administrators who have to be on call when something happens. And the more programs you have, that's like less peace and rest that our administrators get. And so I'm really, really careful about like those types of decisions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Webb, Director Baker. I see Commissioner Bangs.
Yeah, so you mentioned at the beginning that staff seems to be pretty stable right now, or staffing turnover. I assume that you're talking about turnover in that statement. Am I correct?
Yeah, I was speaking specifically to the staff that we have on our child and family team, that those providers, while they're exhausted, are committed and stable in their work, but we do have openings on that team. And so the longer, the longer it takes for us to fill those positions, I would say the less stable those providers are going to get, right? Because they're just going to be taking on more and more and trying to support the entire community. So yeah, we have several open QMHP positions.
And what type of outreach has CBH done in order to try to fill those positions? I assume it's all the traditional, speak to the, colleges, speak to the universities, advertisement and so on and so forth.
Yeah. That's true. And it hasn't, our most successful tactic that the team has done has been around like recruiting interns, and particularly interns from the area who want to get their master's degree, because we're much more likely to then hold on to them. But the interns only start like a couple times a year, and it takes them a while to get up to speed, and it takes a while to learn how to do the work. And we've talked about actually like bringing in a temp. We used a temp agency during the pandemic, not for like ongoing client care, because you don't want to disrupt those relationships, but to at least help us like with intakes and assessments and that sort of thing, to get folks in quickly. Like we've talked about, do we need to revisit that? Or do we hire more bachelor level folks who can do more case management so that we free up master level time to just do like family therapy and individual therapy?
Well, and that was my curiosity, was hiring more bachelor level, just for them to offset the caseload. I know the more I learn about the mental health field, the more I recognize how very diversified it is and how very specialized certain individuals are becoming in certain levels of care. And so I was curious, could we hire, more bachelor level folks for I hate saying it, for less,
Yes.
in order to
Yes, we're go ahead, Shira.
I was just going to add that there's this kind of other element that has changed in this field over the last several years, in that throughout like the pandemic and workforce shortage across the state, some changes have been made, right? And so community behavioral health used to be a place where new graduates would come and learn, right? Like they'd come and they'd get their supervision and they'd work towards their clinical license. And oftentimes we'd try to hold on to them and they'd stay with us. And sometimes they'd go into private practice. Now you can be unlicensed and bill Medicaid. That didn't used to be the case. And so there's an element of the fact that like people don't have to use community mental health providers to sort of get their initial experience. They're allowed to go from graduate school to private practice. And that was a solution, right, to get more providers in the field that are able to be credentialed and bill and meet the needs, the very substantial needs in the state. But that means that we're not getting that opportunity to supervise, train, and then retain new graduates. They're just going straight into private practice, which I don't want to say it's easier, right? But we know what community behavioral health is. We know the population that we serve. And especially now that most private practice clinicians can do virtual care from their homes, that's a direction that a lot of new graduates are going.
And just one final follow-up, and this might be just a personal opinion on your parts, but doesn't that feel very disorganized? It's just what I've been noticing from my side is that the mental health field across the state feels very disorganized. There's very little connections between entities, and so I'm just wondering, from your position, does it also feel disorganized?
Yes, I mean, the reality is our entire healthcare system is a bunch of independent operating players. And that we have to figure out like how to coordinate with each other in spite of that. I think for me, like the Medicaid system makes more sense because there's at least some congruence around the services that are provided. I think commercial insurance is, man, it's a wing and a prayer if you can find somebody to work with you. It's not, there's really nobody overseeing the commercial insurance system. If somebody's panel is full, then you just call the next person. So it's, yes, like my long convoluted answer to your question is, yeah, it's pretty disjointed.
Well, thank you for your time.
Yes, thank you. I really appreciate the update and presentation from both of you, and appreciate all your hard work.
Thank you. We appreciate you.
Thanks.
Thank you both. We'll move on to the next item, which is it's election time, and we'll have an update on the election process from our county clerk, Tracy Korobenko. Tracy.
Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you, Chair Quayla. For the record, Tracy Korobenko, County Clerk. Yes, I just wanted to come to you guys today and explain this November's election process that's coming before us. This November, we have 3 measures, and it's the City of Warrenton, Cannon Beach Rural Fire Protection District, and Mist Birkenfeld Fire Protection District. This will consist of about 6,000 voters, and the ballots are actually being mailed out today from Portland. Most turnouts on the average for this type of election for our county has been around 40%. So that's about 2,400 returned ballots. We always aim for as many as possible, so we always plan on 50%. So 50% is about 3,000 ballots. So a few things we want to do different. First of all, our 24-hour drop sites. We're only going to be having the City of Warrenton and the City of Cannon Beach, and along with the one outside our office open to receive ballots, since those are the only areas with an election at this time. We also are partnering with Columbia County with the Mist Birkenfeld Rural Fire Protection District. They have a drop site within their actual department, the fire department office itself. So they'll be collecting ballots from there and then returning them into us. If they're ours, if they're theirs, then we'll keep them for them. So this time we were also normally we would be bringing in temporary workers to do signature verification and receiving of the ballots. This time I'm planning on working on training our newer staff signature verification, so they will be final signature verifiers with our temporaries. So we'll be doing a lot of this work at our desks, and therefore there are no cameras over our desks, and we live stream all of our process normally by completing all the work in our signature verification room. This allows us to be available to assist other areas as we are working in signature verification. It is going to be a slow process. There's not that many. We'll get a handful in one day, a handful in another day. You know, so it's going to be a very minimal process, this election. So there's no place for observers at our desk as well, and we'd like to keep them at a safe distance. And we always try to allow different parties to come and observe the process and all processes of our procedures. And this year, we are deciding not to allow them into our office. One reason is because we are doing it at our desk. And the second reason is it's tax season. So we've got property tax, assessment and tax collecting money ongoing all day during this election season. And there is the security window that we have in our office. And we're going to allow them an area up there to stand. If someone shows up to observe, they can see all of our desks. They can see us working the process. Again, we don't know when that will be. Normally, I mean, during big elections, we have usually a set time. The smaller elections, we just do it as we have received them. And then also our opening boards, we'll be actually having them come in only on election day in the afternoon. They'll be coming in about 2 o'clock. And of course, this will all be live streamed. And they'll process whatever ballots we have available at that time. And we are doing a pickup at 1 p.m. from all the 2 drop sites in our office. So they'll have those ballots as well to open. Again, if we get to 3,000, they can process about 100 ballots every 15 minutes each board, where you'll have 2 boards. So we're getting through, what is that, 800 in an hour. And we won't be there more than a couple of hours if we even get to 3,000. So the pickup at the drop sites is going to be just 2 times a week for this election. Normally it is 3, but because it is such a small election and a smaller group of voters, we're going to empty the ballot boxes twice a week. And save us some taxpayer money, save us time, just process all at once. Election day, again, 1 p.m. and at closing at 8 p.m. we will have staff, temporaries, casuals, bipartisan pairs working to close each drop site at 8 p.m. We would like to do something new this time. When they return from the drop sites on election night after 8 p.m., we would like to put the sealed transport boxes into our secured ballot processing room where they will be on camera. And we would like to leave them secured until the morning, because our election boards will be done. They start at 2, they'll be gone by 4, 5 o'clock at the latest. And then on Wednesday morning, we would come in and confirm the seal numbers. Each transport carrier is sealed and documented. And we can confirm the numbers and then open and prepare the ballots for processing on Wednesday. I don't anticipate it being very many since we are picking up at 1 o'clock. So it'll only be those ones that have been turned in from 1 p.m. to 8 p.m. And then at that point, we will post results again by 5 p.m. on Wednesday. And then also with new laws with our postmarks, being able to take postmarks and election curing of challenge ballots, we won't be posting any further updates until Wednesday, November 29th. I know it seems like a long time, but during this time, we'll be handling all the challenge ballots for signature discrepancy and ballots that are postmarked on time. We have 7 days to receive ballots that are postmarked on time. So the first 7 days, we're just waiting for mail. And then they have 21 days to cure a challenge ballot. So that's why we picked November 29th, just to 28th is the last day to cure any challenge ballots. Again, we live stream all of this. The schedule is of our live stream activity and the schedule of our election results are posted on our website under the election day. So, and if you recommend that we stay and process all received ballots on election night, I wanted you to be aware that we will not be posting additional results until the Wednesday, November 29th, not again on Wednesday. And this is all to protect voters' anonymity. If you take the cast vote record and the ballot image or a person's voter record name, you could possibly tie their vote to them And we don't want any of that to happen. And with this small election, there's just a handful of precincts involved, especially in Miss Merkenfield. If we get 1 or 2 ballots that come in late and they're challenged, they're going to know how they're voted. People are going to know who turned those in because they came in later or they were challenged, and now they're good, and they'll know how they voted. And we really want to eliminate as much of that as possible. So with that, I'm just looking to see if you have any questions or concerns or any suggestions on what you would like to see.
Well, thank you, County Clerk. I appreciate the presentation. I guess my concern is about the length of time in counting, and I know that always presents an issue in the community, why we can't get results sooner. And I also, I am concerned, of course, as we've had people reviewing and monitoring, our elections, that we want to have full transparency in what's being done. So I just was curious, I mean, what the rest of the commission thinks, but I am a little bit concerned about maybe, not having full transparency and viewing the counting of the ballots, and then also having people go home and not count the rest of the ballots and having a result by the end of the night. That seems to me like the way we should be conducting it.
Yeah, yes, that is how we have been doing that. But again, like with the new laws that have taken effect with postmarks, we're still waiting on ballots for 7 days, and then the challenges are 21 days. And that's all it is there's no results until we certify, and that's really not until, I hope to do it a little early, but December 4th. I mean, election is November 7th. And we're not certifying until December 4th, so it can change at any time between those times. But I hear what you're saying. Thank you, Chair.
And I recognize that the results can change, and those are that there will be challenge ballots and postmark, but it seems still that we should be doing our best to try to get the ballots counted immediately, and doing so in full, transparency, so people can see what we're doing. That just seems to me the best way to go. I see Commissioner Bangs has her hands up.
Well, I agree with Chair in regards to the potential concerns of transparency. And I'm just curious if we can advertise well-documented times in order to do those counts at. So obviously we are going to want to do our original count, obviously on the date of election, the finalized, because that's where the majority is going to be. But then I'm just curious that if moving forward after that particular date, that November date or that May date, wherever we're at in the year, that then we advertise, like we hold all ballots and then count, and then hold all ballots and then count. And maybe you shared that. I'm multitasking right now, so I could have missed it. I'm apologizing.
Yes, we do put a schedule out on our website, and we try to get it out there as much as possible of the times we will be opening, counting, and posting results. We do make it, we do stick to it as much as we can. Sometimes we do have to make changes to it, but we make changes in the actual posting of it as well as when we do the changes. But yes, we do make sure that that's available for the public.
Commissioner Webb.
Yeah, Tracy, have there ever been elections where we have had employees counting at their desks?
No, we are not counting at our desks. We're only checking signatures on the outside envelopes. All envelopes are sealed, and we are scanning them, receiving them, marking them received, and signature verification. Then they get put back into the secure locked room. But this has been a process that, yeah, we have done for years here and in Washington County. It is a common practice to be signature checking at your desk if need be.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Banks?
Well, I'm pretty sure everyone already knows that election processes have been under a heavy microscope for the last couple of years. And so I'm just trying to think of ways to mitigate that microscope for Clatsop County. And I'm just wondering if we take all counting and all signature checking and all activities in regards to ballots to a separate location, a separate secure location that mitigates the use of a desk or personal, anything in regards to our employees. And this is just me, thinking outside of the box, but I'm recognizing that on the landscape that this conversation is only going to continue, probably at least through the next presidential election, and that whatever we can do to minimize the microscope for our employees is probably what I would like to do. And so I'm interested in exploring alternative locations for you guys that are secure and keep these ballots secure, and also adhere to all of the other state regulations. I'm so sorry for what you guys, but just recognize that I want to be proactive, not reactive. And I fear that we might just, it's a conversation going on these days. So I appreciate your time. Thank you.
County Manager?
I just want to kind of reiterate just a little bit about Clatsop County's processes. To Tracy's credit and to the credit of her staff, we have a very, very solid election process. I agree with the board, though, that transparency is vital. And I think, our philosophy has been, we count all the ballots received, or we process all the ballots received by 8:00 the night of the election. And, I think that is still something we can do. I think Tracy's point being in the small election is there are some uniquenesses that happen in a small election that are different than what we see in the more countywide election processes. And so I think certainly we can come up with a plan for your board to count all the ballots before, all the ballots that are received by 8. I think that, the observation, at least, and Tracy can correct me if I'm wrong, but even observing from the security window is not uncommon for a lot of, counties. It's not of a distance that would not allow them to participate as an observer. So that wouldn't be unusual. I think to Commissioner Bang's point, it would be awesome, and I know Tracy would love to have all the elections processes happening in the same area. Unfortunately, that's just not an option right now. So, but that's certainly something that we would all aspire to at some point. But let us go back. We wanted to come today just to have this conversation because we didn't want any surprises, but certainly transparency, accuracy, and just accountability for the election system is a paramount priority. So we will come back to your board and take your feedback. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you, County Manager. Commissioner Webb?
Yeah. Is even an election that is small like this, do we still use our machine as the ultimate count?
Yes, we still use our 850 that will do scanning the ballots.
Okay,
That's correct.
okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Yeah, thank you, County Clerk, for the presentation. Thank you, County Manager, for your comments as well. And appreciate. Well, I know that we will have a very good election on November 7th. So thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move on to the next item, which is the proposed methodology to establish limits on short-term rental units. And I will turn it over to Gail Henriksen, our Community Development Director. Gail.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, Commissioners. Gail Henriksen, Community Development Director. And we are here today to begin a discussion about establishing caps for our short-term rental units in unincorporated Clatsop County. And as we're working through this process, your board's discussion and your direction back to staff is really going to be driven by the overarching public policy goal that you're looking to create. And that's that goal of balancing quality of life in our various communities throughout the county, protecting health and safety, yet still trying to be mindful of owners' rights and allowing them to use their properties within the parameters that your board sets as part of your policy role. And so before we jump into the presentation, I just want to take a brief moment and kind of set up the presentation and the thought that went in behind it. And we know that caps can be established in a variety of ways. You can use a hard and fast number. You can look at short-term rentals as a percentage of existing dwelling units. You can base caps based on geographic locations or any combination of those. And so you'll see that as we get into the presentation that staff prepared some initial recommendations. And those initial preliminary drafts are really intended to be a framework, to create the framework so that your board can have a discussion and start sifting through these options without staff just giving you a blank slate or blank piece of paper and saying, well, here's your options, tell me what you like. It's really meant to kind of help you focus so that you can help refine your objectives and give direction back to staff. And so we also want to make sure that you've got flexibility, that your board has flexibility as you work to develop this process. So when we get to the recommendation section, don't take them as a hard and fast thing. These can all be refined by your board, changed by your board, adapted by your board for specific regions throughout the county. So again, it's really meant to be just a starting point for your discussion. So before I move forward, I'm just going to pause briefly and see if there are any questions about that. All right, so seeing none. Just a brief background. This is where I usually do my wonderful slide with all our meetings and color coordinated lines, but we'll skip that this time. We've done over 25 public meetings since 2019 talking about short-term rentals, and that includes a variety of work sessions, public hearings, and public town hall meetings where presentations were given and the community was invited to give their feedback to staff and to your commissioners. And then just briefly, the last time we started talking about caps was in August of last year. And at that time, your board had just adopted Ordinance 2205. It was in the process of being placed on the May ballot for a referendum to repeal it. That referendum occurred, that vote in May of this year. The referendum was denied, and so that ordinance now is in effect. And that ordinance is the one that added short-term rentals to 16 different zones throughout the county, in addition to Arch Cape. So before we move on from this slide, when we decided to prepare this topic for your consideration at today's work session, staff began by looking first where the SDRs were located within the county. And then we compared that number of short-term rentals to the overall number of dwelling units within each zone. And I really want to give a shout out to assessment and taxation and GIS staff who worked very hard to pull together all that data and the accompanying maps. They put a lot of effort into this presentation that you're seeing today. And then after we had that data pulled together, we looked at the number of complaints that we were receiving about short-term rentals, and those go back to 2018. And we looked at the types of complaints and the geographic areas where the complaints were occurring. And then from that point, we could begin to put those two data sets together and start identifying patterns or correlations between where SDRs are located, where we're receiving the complaints. And that in turn enable staff to start putting together some preliminary recommendations to start your board's discussion today. So in terms of where we find STRs, first of all, I want to note that between 2022 and October 6th of this year, we did lose 6 STRs. So the numbers actually went down very slightly. So right now we've got 175 licensed STRs in the unincorporated county areas. Just over 74% of all those STRs are located west of Highway 101. And that's really not unusual, because if you think of one of the primary reasons that visitors come to the area, it's to be able to be near the beaches and the coastal parks that we have up and down the county coastline. So then the next step we did is we took the total number of STRs by zone and then looked at the total number of dwelling units in each of those zones to figure out what the percentage of STRs were versus the total number of dwelling units. And so you'll see that in the RA5 area, which is just around Surf Pines and Highway 101, they're at about 1% of the total dwelling units, but in Cove Beach, they are just over 24% of the total number of dwelling units. And the numbers range around in between from there. So the next step after that, so now we know where the short-term rentals are located. We've got an idea of the percentage. We wanted to see what type of complaints were being generated, because complaints is really what have been driving this process since the beginning. So the number of complaints, really, we've had 142 since July of 2018. The majority, the top 3, and this is consistent across the years, deal with noise, parking, not operating with a permit, and trash complaints. And so those top 4 make up 54% of all the complaints that we receive about short-term rentals. So then looking at where geographically those complaints are occurring, Arch Cape, which has the highest number of STRs, they have 66 of our 175 short-term rentals. They generated only 15 complaints over the past 5 years. Comparatively, short-term rentals that have a Warrenton address or located in Cove Beach generated 111 of those 142 complaints over that same time period. And overall, 88% of all complaints were generated by short-term rentals that are west of Highway 101. If we go a little bit deeper into that, you can see that that there were 2 properties, one in Cove Beach, which generated 41% of all the complaints in Cove Beach. Sorry, Commissioner Banks, you have your hand up.
I think you're currently answering my question, so thank you.
Okay, let me know if I don't. So we had 2 properties, one in Cove Beach that generated 20 complaints, or 41% of the complaints in the Cove Beach area. And in Warrenton, there was a specific property that generated 26 complaints, or 45% of all those overall Warrenton complaints. But when we talk about complaints, not every complaint is verified. Not every complaint results in code compliance action. So when code compliance looks at complaints, several things can happen. Code compliance staff can go there and find that the violation is still occurring. They can visit the site and see that there is no violation. Perhaps the violation's already been resolved by the point of contact person for the short-term rental. Perhaps what the person was complaining about isn't really a violation, or for some other reason, staff just can't verify that a violation has or is occurring. So there's a lot of things that can happen. Sometimes the complaint is outside our jurisdiction, things like trespassing, things like animals off leash or trespassing. Those things are outside code compliance staff jurisdiction, and so there's no action that we can take on those types of complaints. So overall, of the 142 complaints that code compliance received since July of 2018, 61 of them, or 43%, either we could not verify, there was not a violation occurring, or it was something that was outside of staff's jurisdiction.
I see Commissioner Banks has her hand up.
Yes, Commissioner.
So I just wanted to ask about the two properties that have taken up a majority of, or almost a majority of complaints for those two specific areas. Are those problem properties, or were those complaints unfounded, or is it a neighbor that is upset that there's a short-term rental next door?
All of the above. So
Okay.
they, and I say that in all seriousness, sometimes complaints are verified. Usually it's noise complaints. And, we know if a sheriff's officer goes out, you can usually document if there's a noise complaint. Sometimes the owners have installed noise monitoring systems, which would tend to lend credence to the fact that they understand noise complaints are happening and they're valid noise complaints. Sometimes it may just be a concern by a particular neighbor about what's happening at a short-term rental. And sometimes the complaints just can't be verified or aren't really a violation, or they get resolved within the time frames established by our code. So it really truly is all of the above.
And don't we have a methodology already in place for a problem property?
So when we talk about violations, it's possible for a permit to be revoked, either for a health violation, and that could be done immediately by the public health director. If there is a safety issue, that permit can be immediately revoked by the building official. Otherwise, it would have to go through a hearings officer process, and it would have to ultimately come to your board, possibly, if that process were appealed. And so you'll see later on in some of the recommendations staff is putting forward, we would like to have a third option or a fourth option to have that at the staff level for non-emergency health related issues, where we could do a revocation. The other reason that the process is a little bit difficult to enforce is that you may have 3 verified complaints, but your complaint may be there's a bread wrapper hanging on the outside of a garbage can. It could be that somebody has spilled crackers on somebody's property, or it could be, another minor thing. So you have 3 valid complaints that have been verified, but is that something that rises to the threshold of revoking a permit? So that's the other side of the coin, I guess, on that one. All right. So moving on to recommendations. And again, just reminding your board that this is meant to be a starting point and a framework to be able to give you something to hang on to as you process the information and start working on your policy that you want to craft to address short-term rentals. We can change these however you best determine. So again, we understand that there's a correlation. We have a majority of short-term rentals on the west side of 101, and we have a majority of complaints on the west side of 101. So that's really the area staff chose to focus on with our recommendations. We didn't, as part of this presentation, initially recommend any caps east of Highway 101 except for Arch Cape. All the caps otherwise would be focused on the west side of 101, which is that desired coastal area for short-term rentals. I also wanted to point out that when we started this discussion last year, we came forward as staff with a 4% recommendation, and then we obviously put that on pause while we worked through the referendum process. But in the meantime, Lincoln County, who had been through a lot of litigation on this subject, adopted their own short-term rental cap for the unincorporated areas. And the cap that they chose, depending on which of the 7 areas was covered, was between 1% and 2%. So they made some very drastic cuts and when they established their caps. And you'll see that staff is not recommending anything quite that drastic. We have basically Oh, look, I have an extra slide. So anyway, before I get to my recommendation, I'm going to put you all on edge here. You're going to have to wait. But we actually looked at 4 different levels based on percentage of dwelling units, a 1% cap like Lincoln County, the 4% originally proposed last year, an intermediate 7% cap, and then a 10% cap, just to see what the numbers came out as. And what we wanted to do is make sure that not only do you have something that would start reducing these highly concentrated pockets of short-term rentals, but that still had the ability to allow growth in other areas where we don't have the high concentration and where people may want to establish short-term rentals. And so this slide just basically breaks that down by the 1, 4, 7, and 10% caps and gives you an idea of what would be allowed then in each zone versus what's there today and how much would be available outside if you wanted to cap it at just the 175 that we have today. So there you go. So now that you've been on edge, I can finally relieve that tension. And look, so initial starting point, we threw out a 10% cap in Arch Cape, and that would be east and west of the highway. And the reason for 10% is that Arch Cape has historically had the most number of STRs. They've had short-term rentals there for decades and decades and decades. And generally, as we saw from the complaint matrix, that the number of complaints is very low over a 5-year period. You're getting 3 complaints a year on average. So we felt that these reasons might justify your board considering a higher cap for the Arch Cape area. What we would also recommend is that west of 101, for the other remaining residential zones, that your board might want to consider, possibly a 4% cap or a 7% cap or some other number that makes sense to you. As I said, we haven't recommended any caps east of Highway 101, but your board may want to consider either an overall cap that puts an overall limit on the number of short-term rentals county-wide, or you may want to consider some sort of percentage for those properties east of Highway 101 as well, because we want to make sure that we don't create a problem where a problem doesn't exist today. And so we just want to make sure either through continued monitoring or something, a level that your board establishes for those properties east of Highway 101, because we do want to protect those communities and their quality of life there as well. Let's see here. So ultimately, the goal of the caps is that as properties get sold or transfer ownership, that those licenses could not be renewed if an area was over their cap threshold. And so over time, that would ultimately thin out those pockets of concentration and begin addressing some of those quality of life issues that we're seeing. And Commissioner Banks, you have your hand up again.
A couple things. So I did want to provide some feedback just with this particular slide. I want to look at this as trying to keep this as simple as possible for future county staff, and would like the percentage of cap. It's neither here nor there for me whether or not it's 4 or 5 or 7. But I would like the cap to be the same everywhere for simplicity's sake. And then I'm not interested in a total 175 STR for unincorporated Clatsop County cap, mainly just because I think we're already there. And I feel like, again, that's adding their layers of effort to future county staff's concerns. I would like these permits to be passed on sale of the property, because I feel like the property value is associated with the fact that a property is potentially a short-term rental. It doesn't mean that the person who purchases the property is going to be using it as such in its future. Granted, it would be a slower phase out of the overabundance of short-term rentals in certain areas, but it would still end up phasing out and lowering the overall percentage of number of short-term rentals in certain areas. And then I would definitely like to explore how to revoke permits for problem properties. I know that we'll probably have to engage with county council just in regards to the best methodology so that we don't put ourselves into situations for future litigation. But I mean, I have a little bit of a softer approach, but I fully support, you know, the 4% cap. I fully support, you know, a 7% cap, just depending on, you know, my fellow commissioners' thought processes in regards to the percentage. But I do really want to keep this as simple as possible for county staff moving forward into the future, and not separate out by zones. I think we kind of put ourselves in a pickle previously when we separated our zones. And so I like the one for all for one thought process.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Banks. Do we want to move on to the, yeah.
Yep. So staff also had a couple of other recommendations. One would be to reduce the permit length from its current 2 years to a 1-year permit and increase the permit fee from $550 up to $1,000. And what staff would propose is with the additional funding to use that partly to continue to support the short-term rental complaint hotline, but also to be able to hire a part-time co-compliance person who would be dedicated strictly to short-term rentals, both enforcement and education, and giving the county the ability to be a little bit more proactive in reaching out to short-term rental owners about enforcing and the good neighbor policies, making people aware of it, and being a little bit more proactive than we can be at this time. And so really my questions at this point, you know, is there still an interest with the board in moving forward with caps, and then really awaiting your direction and discussion to help us help you be able to move that policy forward. And then, you know, depending on how our discussion goes, you know, we could bring this back as early as November for a public hearing, and then adopting that and having that in place by January 1st, potentially. And that concludes. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Gail. I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner Bangs and then Commissioner Webb. So Commissioner Bangs, you have your hand up first.
So to answer your two questions, yes, I'm interested in still continuing to explore caps for our short-term rentals. And then in thoughts on the previous slide, I am more interested. So I'm kind of wanting a slower approach, either increasing the permit cost or making it yearly, but probably not both at the same time. I would like to see numbers supporting both. And so I get and I understand that we need the part-time code compliance person because of the uptick in phone calls and whatnot. But I would also, there is a hesitancy that I have just in regards to doing both at the same time unless it's absolutely needed, because it is a burden upon property owners who are not using their short-term rental to the extent that it could possibly be used. So those are just my two thoughts. And then, man, I just forgot the second question that you were wanting a response on. I apologize.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Banks. Commissioner Webb.
Yeah, thank you. It's very, very seldom that I ever disagree with our community development director. But one of the things, Gail, that you did say at the beginning of your presentation, it was that complaints have been driving our discussion about short-term rentals. And I would argue with that a little bit because I think that it isn't just the issue of complaints. I think it's the issue of the nature of neighborhoods and how people feel about who lives next door to them and who lives down the street. And one of the so to me, I mean, from what I hear from people about the issue of short-term rentals, is much more of kind of a neighborhood quality of life. Surely complaints contribute to that, the noise and the traffic and the yada yadas. But I think it's larger than that. And so I think that drives the way I feel about several of the suggestions that you've made. I think I agree with most of them entirely. I would like to be able to take a little closer look about what I want to take your slides from here and go through our maps and see sort of where I think this would actually, what it looks like, I guess, on the ground. And I certainly want to continue the discussion. I think we have an enormous amount of public concern about what we're doing, and I think caps are absolutely necessary. Once again, I agree with Commissioner Bangs that I certainly hope that our county council will be at our elbow the whole time we go through this, because I am very concerned about, I know he's been watching the issues in the rest of the state. And in talking to fellow commissioners on the coast, I know this is something that I've talked at great length with several of them. So I think it's something that we're definitely going to need our council's guidance on. Yes, I would love you to keep going on it. I think this is a terrific report. I really honor it. I would just like some more time to study it and to understand its implications. One of my concerns is about the properties along the Route 30 corridor. We have seen a very pronounced uptick in the use of our two county parks that provide launching for fishing boats. And I think that's going to put some pressure on the Route 30 corridor. Neither one of our parks, one of them does allow overnight camping, but I think that's going to increase the demand for STRs along the river. And as I say, I'd just like to take a look at kind of where those pressure points are. I'd like a little time. Otherwise, thank you so much, Gail, as always. This is just a terrific presentation. I understand so much more now than I did before. And I just like a little time to study it. And I think in general, I'm very much in favor of all of your recommendations. I think we need caps virtually everywhere. And I just would like to take a look at what, on the map, on the ground, what that looks like a little. One other question, I guess, Gail, is that when you mention Warrenton, you're talking about Warrenton addresses, not so that it's Clatsop Plains is the area that you're talking about when you mentioned something. Okay.
That's correct, Commissioner Webb.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. This was just fabulous work. Thanks so much.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Webb. And before I go to Commissioner Bangs, I would want to take the opportunity to agree with both my fellow commissioners, because I think I too would like to have additional time to kind of review and digest this. There's a lot of analysis that's gone into this report. Really appreciate all the hard work on the part of community development. I do think that the problem seems to be kind of this compliance and problem properties that we don't have a really great process to revoke permits if we have bad players, and they constitute a great deal of these complaints. That we need to have a mechanism to deal with it better. It sounds like I do think that it's nice to have a standardization between all of the zones rather than a very complex tapestry of different caps. But I'm certainly willing to kind of look at it a little more closely, and I do appreciate having this discussion today and the presentation. I probably side with Commissioner Banks too, to be a little more lenient to allow for a higher percentage of that cap rather than the lower end. So Commissioner Banks.
Yes, thank you. So I just wanted to address the potential concern about the Highway 30. So this ODF has a number of campsites available to folks along Highway 30. And Kotzkenai just recently opened, I think in this last year, a wonderful, beautiful RV/campground just right at the entrance of Kotzkenai. So though I think that we should keep our eyes on it, I don't share the concern regarding that this might put pressure on the rural community out along the river, just mainly because already we don't have an abundance of housing available to be purchased. And so it would be a slow uptick, and I really trust our county staff that they're going to have their eyes on any of our regions, just making sure that in the future we don't get stuck in the current pickle that we're in. And on the note of just this discussion today, it's going to evolve, and I would say that my statements are probably not hard and fast statements, that as this conversation evolves and as we get more information, my thoughts may change, but I do support a countywide cap, and I really want to keep this simple for our future staff. So whatever we do end up doing, I would like it to be one for all, and not separating our unincorporated counties and calling out specifics, because I feel like that might put us in yet another pickle of not having enough staff. So anyhow, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Bangs. And I know we don't have two of our commissioners with us today, so it'll be important for them to weigh in and share their opinion as well. Anything further, Gail?
Yeah, I just pulled up a map briefly, and this is the Napa-Swenson area. Right now, we have two short-term rentals out there. One of them is on exclusive farm use land, so that permit will not be renewed when it comes up. And then the other one is in the Napa-Swenson rural community residential. So right now, there's not a big demand for that area. So, and again, that could change in the future, but I just wanted to give you that information. And thank you for your time today.
Gail, thank you. Really appreciate the hard work of putting this together, and thank you for the presentation. Okay, last item on our agenda is the strategic plan review on page 26. And I'll turn it over to our county manager, Don Boone.
Thank you, Chair Quaylen, members of the board. We'll be a little bit brief on this. I know there's been a lot of good conversation, and certainly this is something that I see as another great conversation topic, as well as a great accomplishment for your board and the county. But Amanda's going to be joining me. Amanda, are you on? Okay, I can't see everybody. There she is. Okay. I'm going to have Amanda do the bulk of the presentation up until we talk about some of the accomplishments. I do want to say, though, that, and this is something that has been said many times, that, you know, organizations talk about strategic planning, but not all are in it for the long term. And I think that for us, this has proven to be a very valuable tool for staff as we go through the budget process, as well as a focus of all of our energy and our efforts. But it's with your board support that this happens or doesn't happen. And so I thank you for your support, because I continue to believe that it's a critical cornerstone to the whole governance process for the county. So, but I'm going to hand it over to Amanda, and I'm sorry, Amanda, if I said anything that you would have already said too. So, but Amanda will go over the presentation until the end. Thank you.
I was going to say good morning, but I guess it's afternoon. Good morning, Chair Quaylen, members of the board. Don did take a little bit of what I was going to say. Amanda Rappenchuk, Management Policy Analyst. I was going to pull a Terry Moore and just take a moment to recognize the work as well. To get up to this point and just developing a strategic plan and continuing to revisit and reevaluate the plan's priorities each year is a really big deal. So I just kind of wanted to highlight that again. And it's important to acknowledge that we're entering into the 4th year of the county's planning process. And again, that really speaks to the board's persistence and dedication to this important work. So that being said, this presentation is the kickoff of the annual strategic planning process. Earlier, there was a survey distributed to gather feedback on external factors that will impact the county's ability to deliver services and strategic plan priorities for the next fiscal year. And you'll be discussing the results of that survey at the first strategic planning work session, which is scheduled for Wednesday, November 8th. So this is our agenda for today. We're going to provide an overview of the county's strategic plan, current progress, and what's next, which is the upcoming planning process. First, it's important that we revisit how we define a strategic plan and its purpose. So in a nutshell, a strategic plan is a roadmap which allows for the county to effectively coordinate the efforts of both elected officials and county staff. And why do we have one? Why is this significant? Well, coordinating our efforts means effectively matching the county's priorities with the appropriate resources, or in many cases, identifying the resources needed to accomplish these priorities. A plan creates a mechanism for the board to adapt to the community's changing needs, ensure transparency in doing so, and holding us accountable to this work. So the county began its year-long strategic planning process in January 2020. This was a collaborative effort conducted in partnership with the Center for Public Service at Portland State University and engaged elected officials, staff, stakeholder groups, and the general public. So the result of that work is the county's new strategic plan, which was adopted by the board in January 2021. These next few slides are a review of the foundational components of this plan that have continued through each annual review process so far. So the first one is the vision, and I'll just read through these just kind of as a reminder of what they are. So in a world of change and uncertainty, people trust Clatsop County to provide public services and facilities in an effective, efficient, and equitable manner. The county's mission. The county will identify the broad services it understands community members want and are willing to support. Provide those services effectively, efficiently, equitably, within budget, and in partnership with other public, nonprofit, and private sector service providers. And the guiding values: engagement and collaboration, effectiveness and efficiency, equity, transparency, and accountability. So these are the plan's 5 focus areas. This doesn't mean that the most important services in the county fall within these categories, but rather the board selected these 5 focus areas based on interpretation of public interest and priorities, quality of life goals, and areas where county leadership is focused on moving initiatives forward. In June 2022, the board adopted the first annual update to the strategic plan, establishing priorities for fiscal year 22-23. And the most recent update established priorities for this current fiscal year was adopted by the board in May 2023. So this is a general overview of the planning process. Something we've talked a little bit about already in the presentation is the annual planning process. So this is that, like that second rectangle box. During our annual planning process, the board establishes new or continued priorities to carry out the plan's mission in the upcoming fiscal year. And so in that, the bottom one, where it says SP process every 3 to 5 years. So in addition to the annual update, staff have started drafting an outline for the more in-depth planning process that will establish a strategic plan 2026. All of this will still need to come before the board, but we're looking at one more annual update, which would be the 4th annual update, and that would be fiscal year 25-26 priorities, and then about a 16-month planning process for the new plan. which would be adopted around January 2026 and include 26-27 priorities. So before I pass it on to Dawn, who's going to be going over our current progress in implementing the plan, I just want to check in to see if anybody has any questions about this part so far.
Any questions at this time?
So if I could just, Chair Cuerlo, members of the board, expand a little bit on what Amanda just mentioned on this slide, because I think what you find is that you revisit the initial process really every 5 years or thereabouts, where we do a little bit deeper dive into the data and the current conditions of the county. If you recall, when we first did the strategic plan, Terry Moore and his cohorts worked on kind of it was assessment of really community conditions at the time. And of course, that was done right when COVID happened. And so there was a large section in there about COVID because it was something we had never dealt with before. But they tried to really lay out based upon all the different data points about what was the current trend within the county and what some of the emerging trends were in the county as a foundation for then having public discourse about what the priorities may be, and also a conversation honestly about what the role of the county might be. Because, you know, as we all know, every government has its limitations and its lanes that it has to stay in to be effective. And certainly we have resources to do certain things really well, and we don't have resources to do other things. And if those other things become a priority, then we have to sometimes reshuffle the deck or to identify through the legislative process or other processes, revenue sources that can help fund those priorities. So what Amanda was just mentioning is we do see in an upcoming process that more expanded version where we do a much deeper dive into the actual data points, and it'll give us a reference point for what we saw 5 years earlier. We'll see where we are now. And so every so often we will do that as part of the planning process, just to maintain relevance as we move forward. So why do we do this ultimately? We do it because we want to get things done. I mean, that's the biggest thing, is that when I started, you know, I mean, it'll be 5 years this next summer. You know, we wanted to become an organization that could be visibly accountable for the things we were doing and have a really good governance process that the community could understand, that the Board of Commissioners could really efficiently engage in, and that staff could then do the work that the County Board of Commissioners needs us to do. And so I think when I look at all of the successes, and I'm not going to go through all the successes individually, so forgive me, but you have it in your presentation, and I think you all know what those areas are. But what I will say is that we started with what I call some of the foundational work, which is really focusing on the governance of the organization. As you know, the public watches you and how you make decisions and the processes that feed into your decisions. And that's some of the most important work that the county does, is to have governance processes that really, you know, stand the test of time, but also allow the board to be effective and efficient in your decision making. And obviously there's a lot of staff work that has to also complement the work of the board. And you see that all the time with the work sessions, such as today with Gail supporting your processes to make decisions about short-term rentals. So there was a lot of focus on the governance issue, and we've talked about budgets, we've talked about strategic planning, we've talked about board rules, we've talked about how we use work sessions, we've talked about how we are going to function, talk to each other, treat one another, you know, what the roles and the responsibilities are. And that's all foundational things. So without that, all the other work that the county does doesn't happen as effectively and efficiently. And so to your board's credit, we've worked through all of those issues. And I think right now the organization is really working at a very high efficiency, high effectiveness mode. And I'm really proud of all the work we have been doing. So the governance piece is going to be an ongoing discussion that we continually focus on. But the other areas that have been a priority are those 5 areas that Amanda discussed. And I just want to just talk about a few of those because we are making significant progress. When I think about where we started with the housing discussion and where we are now, we've made huge inroads. When I think about talking about the homelessness issues and where we are now, we're making huge inroads. And when I say we, and that's an important term, it's not just the county. It's the county partnering with our nonprofit partners, our private partners, and our other public partners to get stuff done. Nobody does this work alone. We all rely upon others. And so when I look at the infrastructure that's been put in place, it's something that is necessary and is foundational to what we know are going to be additional demands placed on us in dealing with social services. But at the same time, we've built a new jail. We've responded to the COVID pandemic. And I will note that we built the jail within budget. And we've responded to the COVID pandemic. We are aggressively pursuing a lot of issues that have just not had solutions for a long time. And again, housing is one of those. Homelessness is also one of those, but some of our facilities needs. We're aggressively pursuing answers to some of our space constraints, how to use the old jail. We're always dealing with things that we never planned for, like how to reconstruct the net pen pier. Didn't then anticipate that falling into the water, but we are addressing that. There's been amazing work in the social services side with the child care expansion and retention program, jewel-based health centers, a lot of work in dental services, public health fan, mobile crisis intervention, ambulance franchise reviews, and then grants. A lot of good work in the environmental areas regarding brownfields. We have a draft sustainability framework that we hope to bring to your board soon that just kind of articulates and creates a framework about how county operations can be sustainable. A lot of partnerships with our watershed councils, habitat conservation planning, FEMA BIOP. And then you know all of the work that's been going on with the comprehensive plan and the code updates and STRs. So, and then we have North Coast Business Park and the partnership with the port on economic development out at the airport industrial park. So I just want to really say, and I'm going to reiterate this, and I continually say it to everybody, is that the county does 2 things. We take all the thousands of things we do, and we do 2 things. Your board, through the input of the public, interprets public interest. What are the things that people care about? What are the things that they find important to quality of living in their communities, public safety? And then it's public trust. And for government, public trust is everything. So when we talk about elections earlier, what we're really talking about is just public trust. Can the public trust the institutions, the processes, the deliverables of their government or not? And everything we do has to be to reinforce public trust. I'm non-negotiable about public trust. It's the most important thing we do. And so I'm only saying that because everything we do falls in those 2 categories, and the strategic plan is the vehicle that we use to have a process to identify, prioritize, and then be accountable for ensuring that we're actually addressing those public interest issues that are priority, because relevance matters. Governments have to be relevant. So again, I think when I look at it, and again, when I look at the list that I sent you this morning, we are making huge inroads to addressing both the capacity, the current capacity of the county government, as well as how that current capacity needs to expand and morph into what the future is going to require of us. And how we do that is we hire really good staff, we provide the tools, the equipment, and the training and the leadership that they need to stay relevant. But we are doing that. And then we're also addressing all of the other, policy issues that are going to make a difference in the community. So I'm only saying this long-winded, narration because I just think how we do and what we do with the strategic plan is really critical as we move forward as an organization. So I thank Amanda for all the work she has put into this. It obviously takes a lot of time and energy, which is why a lot of governments give up after a year or two. But with your board's support and leadership, we're in it for the long run, and we want to continue this. And I think we will actually get better at it as we go, which is even better. So that's all that I have, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, County Manager. I couldn't sum it up any better. I completely agree with what you just kind of stressed about the collaboration and the hard work that our staff has put into this. And Amanda, your hard work as well. Thank you for everything. I know Chair Bangs or Vice Chair Bangs had to jump to another meeting there. But yeah, this doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's a community effort. And I do appreciate that, we engage our partners and that this is the result of putting those priorities within a framework, and then our awesome county staff putting action items into motion and making sure that we make that progress that you were identifying there. Commissioner Webb.
Please excuse any background noise coming forward, but I couldn't not say that this effort has been led by our county manager, who has encouraged our board working together well, which I think we are doing. The other thing is that our county manager has established that a partnership should exist between the county and the various subdivisions of the county. And that includes both the cities and our special districts. And I think that's a lesson, an initiative that will serve us well in the long term. And I think that the other issue that I'd like to commend the county manager for doing is not only expanding a lot of our management staff, but also hiring the best people for the job. We have assembled a remarkable staff in this county that I think we're all extremely proud of. And I think today was a perfect illustration of that. Having CBH come, who is one of our most strategic partners, and going through all the good work that we've done and highlighting how good our staff is. So I think that I would just like to do special extra kudos to our county manager for having led us through what has been a really very smooth and inclusive, I think, and complete process. So thank you very, very much, County Manager.
Thank you, Commissioner Webb.
Yep, well stated, Commissioner Webb. Completely agree. Well, great work. I don't think we have anything else on our agenda. I will go ahead and unless Commissioner Webb, did you have anything? Okay, we'll go ahead and adjourn. Thank you. Have a good rest of your Wednesday.